Morning team, Fractal Trader here for Fractal Effects. Please make sure you read the disclosure if you're following along with us today. Make sure you do in a demo account, as this is for educational purposes only. We are not financial advisors, and this is not financial advice. We'll jump onto the charts in a minute. We're getting some bearish sentiment. Today is Thursday. Thursday's footprint, as we've discussed in the past, brings us to the weekly range. So we've already almost hit the bottom of the weekly range. Even though we are bullish on the daily, we are bearish on the 1 and the 5. We have a excuse me, a nested model where our midpoints are roughly about the same, even across this big range. You can see midpoints are close, a little higher. Now, a nested model is one of the most chaotic models. You want to proceed with caution. It can just whipsaw back and forth. Doesn't mean you can't find some good trades in here, just have to, again, proceed with caution. So no confirmation as of yet, no confirmation across any of our other assets either. Just patiently waiting. US 500 has not hit its weekly range, has not even swept London lows yet, which means that they could be pausing US 500 while they collect all this liquidity for NAS before pushing them both up. Or NAS could just push US 500, or rather I should pull US 500 down. Just wait and watch. Since we have taken out the lows, I'd like to see it bounce off the weekly range. At 1031. We did have news drop today at 8:30. Didn't really affect the market too much. Small gradual incline, which it filled in. New York fair value gap was all the way up here. I believe that's Asia's that we're seeing in red. I don't think London created one. Bit of a tight range. We are below the 238. Our cross has already happened. Like to bounce off of, most likely bounce off the bottom of the weekly range, pull up, tap up here, and then continue pushing down. That's what I'd like to see. And since US 500 has not hit the weekly range yet, I'm more curious to see what US 500 does. So we do have divergence happening right now, whereas London lows have been swept, and we're sitting in the weekly range, the aqua line marked out by the indicator. And with US 500 has not swept London lows yet, and we have not tapped the weekly range. So just patiently waiting. We might be getting an early retracement here. In certain cases, you almost want to see an early retracement. As mentioned before, we could see it bounce off of here and then push down. Or we could actually just see it push right through. At least that way we get past the divergence and we know exactly which direction we're going. Getting a bit of a pullback here. I want to see if it gets past the top of the weekly range. No other confirmations as of yet. I'd actually like to get that early retracement and then have it pull US 500 down into the weekly range. So I'm more interested in the US 500 right now. We'll see. is my area of interest. I want to see the market pull back in here. I want to see what happens in this fair value gap. If we get above it, we're going to be bullish. We might even look for an early entry. If we bounce off of it, we're most likely bearish. Right now we are bearish on the 1 and the 5. Not quite on the 15. We just got another confirmation, Aussie New Zealand. We'll switch one of these charts over. A lot of back and forth here. We're green across the board. We have an upside. Yep, we have a nice upside expansion model. New York formed inside of London. We do have a green box and a green confirmation. There's London's fair value gap. New York's fair value gap down here. I want to see if this fair value gap stays open. I want to see it come down and touch this 20 EMA and see what happens here. Might even push past, tap New York fair value gap, or even sweep the lows before pushing up, but we want to see what happens at the very least here. At any point you're confused as to which asset we're looking at, just look up here. You'll see the ticker. This is the Australian dollar against the New Zealand dollar. You can just hit search. They're up here, or add it to your watch list. And it's AUD NZD for anybody who hasn't traded Forex before. And have a pip calculator on your charts, or at least open. You can find free ones on Google. As we jump back and forth between assets, you got to remember each asset has its own calculations as far as lot size, or even handles, depending on if you're trading futures. We're looking at the CFD contracts right now. Know the difference. Don't just blindly jump in. Another mistake a lot of beginners make, and this is actually more or less muscle memory. When you get on your, for example, let's say you're trading through MetaTrader, you got to know that the lot size might be previously set, because the lot size, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't really change depending on if you're trading on your phone, for example. It might still have the old lot that you entered in a previous asset. So you want to make sure you look at the lot. Make sure you calculate the new lot for this new asset. Otherwise, you might be over leveraging. Brent crude oil, for example. That's a heavy lot. Like even 2 or 3 lot is very, very heavy. But yet on the indices, you might actually be using 1, 2, or 3 lot. So just a heads up. Now it could retrace. I want to see this fair value gap and see if it stays open in the next minute, 8 seconds. Because it could just retrace to London's fair value gap and keep pushing from here. We're close to 5.5 standard deviations. NAS still pushing up. This is my area of interest for NAS. Either we get a bearish confirmation and then a retracement, or we get this early retracement, but this is the fair value gap that I'm interested in. want to see if it stays below this or above this, and that'll give me my indication of which direction we're going for the rest of the session. I'd like it to just bounce off of this. That probably gives us our 1 to 3 all the way back down to the weekly range since this has not been tapped. And in doing so, I hope it pulls US 500 down with it. That would be a high probability trade setup, especially now that we're below 238. We've already had the cross, tap, touch, push. So this fair value gap has stayed open. This is now my area of interest. I want to see how the market reacts there first. Ideally, I'd like to see it push down further, tap this 20 to make this a little bit better. Remember to zoom in, make sure you have an accurate reading of your fair value gap. The indicator actually paints them out for you, like even the little ones right here. You can see the little red, but just come in and drop a bigger one on top of it using the box tool. And when you do, you want to make sure you go to the style. Your midline is on. We want to know where the midpoint is. You can pick whatever color you want. That makes it easier to see or more appealing to your eye. Let's change this. Actually, the red on red is a little distracting. Change this to white. NAS now bouncing off the top of the weekly range, the aqua line. Remember, Thursday's footprint brings us back to the weekly range, the aqua line painted out by the indicator. That's not 100%, nothing's 100% in the markets, but this gives us a kind of a good indication of what direction the market might want to go and where the target might be. This is looking nice. Just want to see it tap here, bounce off the 238, push down. Let's see what that would look like. I don't want it to get above this fair value gap. If a body closes above this fair value gap and it comes back and taps it, then we're most likely going up. But I'm not going to be interested until I get a bullish confirmation. Just dropping in calculator right now just to see it's 2.24. Now let's see if we can manipulate this. This is the high that I've set it to. That's where I feel most comfortable. Three is all the way down here. I'm comfortable with that, because once we get to 2, which is already up here, as long as your 2 is before your target, you're already taking money off the table, right? You're going to close off percentage of your trade, and you're going to move your stop loss to break even. Then you're in a safe trade. And that's our goal. Still waiting and watching though. No retracement yet. That puts us right around 50% as well. Maybe even 61. That's where I want to see a rejection and a push to the downside. far as Aussie New Zealand, there has been no pullback as of yet, no retracement. We got our confirmation, but then we have not touched any of our other key levels. Our dealing range is down here. We're at the midpoint of the London consequence encroachment fair value gap. Now we have gotten a couple of other confirmations. US 30 just confirmed. And we have a GBP NZD confirmation, but I'm comfortable with these two pairs for now. I believe this could give us the setup we're looking for. 20 EMA slowly coming back up here now. Now there's a lot of points of confluence here. We have the top of the dealing range, we have the London fair value gap, we have the 20 EMA, and we have this fair value gap of interest, which is actually the only fair value gap that's been created that hasn't been filled in. This has all been filled in. Where fair value gaps are only good one time around. We can use them on an inverse just to see where the market is going, but we only utilize these fair value gaps once. Now we're getting some rejection off that fair value gap. Again, I want to see it gesticulate here a little bit longer so the 20 comes up. Make sure you're watching these assets on multiple time frames. The 1, the 5, and the 15 minute. The smaller time frames is where we find our actual foothold. Make sure you watch the video IT, sorry, I think it's under Advanced Concepts, perhaps, but it talks about the ITH and ITL entry. It's on the Learning Hub. So now we're pushing down, hitting that 20. That's what we want to see. Now we want to see either a foothold be created or for it to continue pushing down further, tap the New York fair value gap, and then push up from here. Maybe sweep some lows. It hasn't swept any lows as of yet. Got lows here, lows here. But if it gives us a foothold, we will take it. Starting to push back into the fair value gap. We're back at the midpoint. It's a good rejection. I just want to see a foothold being created. No real foothold created yet. I've laid that in there. There's a liquidity void in there. We're looking for a foothold. Liquidity void is fine as long as it's a relevant liquidity void. This one's already been tapped and filled in. But we are getting creation of another fair value gap here. No, it's been filled in as well. NAS on the other hand now back at our fair value gap of interest. I want to see this reject. I want to see it go past 61%. I don't want to see a candle body close above this fair value gap. No foothold yet on NZD or Oz NZD. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that liquidity void. It's a good candle rejection. I want to see at least one more, but I want to see some better foothold here. Otherwise, there's not too much room for growth. I'd like to get in here. Still no foothold. And when it doesn't give you these footholds, it's one of two things. It just wants to move fast and it doesn't want to let anybody in, or it's going to come crashing down. About 53 seconds left. There's a fair value gap that's forming here. Might be a little too high though. NAS on the left, we're back at the EMAs. I want to see a rejection. I do not want to see a body candle, or sorry, a candle body close above that fair value gap. That'll stick with our bearish sentiment. We are green on the 1 minute, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. We got green on the 1 minute, red on the 5 minute, and then green on the 15. About 7 seconds left. I want to see if this fair value gap stays open. Just don't think there's much room there though. That's our fair value gap of interest right now. That's a 1 to 1.5. 1 to 1.15, I should say. Not enough room there. Would have liked to get in. I would have liked to gotten in down here. Some of these you got to let go even if you see them. Yeah, 1.15, that's not interesting to me. It means 3 would have to be all the way at 2 standard deviations. A little under 2 standard deviations. And the way Aussie New Zealand's been moving back and forth, it's a little higher than where I think it will go. It might sweep the highs here at 1 standard deviation, then push back down. Let's stick to NAS, see if there's an early entry here. We're back at the 20 EMA. So now again, if we have a candle body close, it's fine if it wicks 61 and then comes back down and closes here. If we have a candle body close above this fair value gap, then we might push up, in which case I'd rather wait for a bullish confirmation before making any move. But if we wick and stay down here for a couple of candles, there might be a possible early entry to take us all the way back down to the weekly range. Three minutes, 46 seconds left. Just got another confirmation, GBP USD. Let's jump in over there. Well, let me see if just going to set an alert. So if Aussie New Zealand does come back down here, it'll let us know. Otherwise, it's just not interesting here. There's no money to be made, no room for growth. But we'll jump over to GBP USD. So we did get NAS touched, almost touched 61%. 2 minutes left in this candle. I want to see if it closes here, rejects off of these levels, and I want to see one more rejection. And then we'll see if there's a foothold there to go back down. So we're red across the board on GBP USD. We have a downside expansion model. This is looking good. Here's the weekly range. It's already tapped both sides of it. I'd like to see it come back up, tap the bottom of the weekly range inside this fair value gap. And then push down. %, maybe even up to 61%. It's got some ways to go. Still focusing on NAS. Let's jump to US 500 for a second, just to see if there's divergence. So US 500, clearly the stronger one. We're back at the New York fair value gap, and it's taken out these highs, which NAS has not. But again, if NAS has a tough time getting past this fair value gap, we can use this as an indication that it might just pull both assets down to the weekly range. Down here. We're at 1104. Let's see if we can't find a high probability trade setup. the next 25 minutes. I can see Aussie New Zealand is still gesticulating back and forth, making small incremental moves, but not enough to warrant any interest as of yet. So as mentioned before, there was an entry in here, but it just wasn't enough. Because our stop loss would have had to been at the low point, which is still here. So if this hits one standard deviation, the juice has already been squeezed. We'll ignore this asset today. So we have one candle rejection, but we are above the 238 now. We are on the other side of the consequence encroachment. In order for this to push down, I want to see candles closing below the midpoint and tapping and wicking off of that midpoint, the consequence encroachment. Otherwise, it's not interesting. Here goes Aussie New Zealand. Let's see if it hits one standard deviations. This was the better entry down here, which it never really tapped in. Nas making a second attempt at that 61%. I want to see if this closes outside. If it does, then again, it will most likely just continue up, give us a bullish confirmation. Let's jump back to GBP USD. So we were just taking a quick look at this. We are not interested in this, even though we did suspect that it was going to push up from here. It just does not have enough room for us. One standard deviation is the most that we are willing to go. And that does not give us our 1 to 3. So we're going to avoid that. We'll jump over to GBP USD. Still pushing down. We're at 0.5 standard deviations. Now it might just, that might have been its retracement. It might have just pulled back to the top or the bottom of the dealing range and just push, but I'm more interested closer to the 20 EMA. Getting another candle rejection there on NAS. It's a good sign. Still need to see more. I want to see it get under that midpoint. Okay, so we're here now. We're back at the consequence encroachment. I want to get below this. GBP USD looks like it might want to do another pullback. We're at 0.5 standard deviations. Guys, make sure you create yourself a watch list so you can jump back and forth between all these assets. Just Google it or YouTube it, TradingView watch list, and then you just hit the add and then you add in all these assets. There's Bitcoin, BTC against the USD. We're also looking at Great British Pound against the US dollar, the Euro against the US dollar, Euro against the GBP here, Great British Pound. Aussie NZD, US oil, etc. Just make sure you have them all so you can continue to jump back and forth so you don't have to like look up a new one every single time, and line them up with your broker so the spread is accurate. Still not satisfied here with NAS, as it's still bouncing off the top side of both the 238 and the midpoint of this fair value gap. I want to get below this. Otherwise, it could just continue up. About 15 minutes left in our stream. Just dropping a fib here on GBP USD. So 50% is where 20 is sitting at. It's late in the game. I'm not sure if we'll get that retracement, but that's the area of interest right now, this fair value gap. Now it's making another attempt. I'm going to make outline a little bit of a bigger fair value gap here. That's my area of interest. If it doesn't pull back in here, I'm not interested. Still above the 238. Still on the other side, the wrong side, I should say. The consequence encroachment. But we are turning green. We're green on the 15. We're green on the 1. Now, if this crosses over and we get green on the 5, then we'll most likely abandon this bias that'll push down. About 14 minutes left in the stream. No real pullback. Still stuck there. Let's just go back to US 500 for a second here. Hasn't quite reached the midpoint of the New York fair value gap, but we are above the 238, and again getting ready for that crossover on the 5, which might be an indication that both of these want to push back up. So if we get a crossover here, this will most likely go all the way to the top. We'll see. Still pulling back into the same fair value gap. We'll switch this one back to GBP USD. This is the first candle that's closed underneath the consequence encroachment. Let's see if it stays there. Now we're below the 238 as well. 3 minutes 45 seconds left in this candle. I don't think GBP is going to come back up in our session, during our session. We're now back above the 238. Might just gesticulate here. About 8 minutes left in our stream. Let's take a look at what US 30 is doing. US 30 was another asset that confirmed. We had 4 of them confirm at the same time, so we didn't want to jump around back and forth. This might give us a good indication. So it didn't give us a foothold at all. So it gave us a confirmation, green across the board. Also more of a contraction model. Didn't take out London lows. Bullish confirmation, and then just took off all the way to 1 standard deviation. The closest. I don't even think it came back into this fair value gap. No. Nah, still the most interesting pair, or the asset I should say. Still gesticulating between the consequence encroachment of this fair value gap, 61%. And again, if 5 turns green, we'll abandon any bearish bias, which will most likely happen in the next 6 minutes. That'll be the end of our session anyways. GBP USD, doing a bit of a retracement now, but we've already gone 1 standard deviations. NAS now pushing past that fair value gap. So most likely pull up, turn our 5 green, or again, it could just continue to gesticulate here. Go as high as 71%, 79, tap the New York fair value gap and come back down. They're too big of a range here. So I got a few minutes. Still stuck at 61% for NAS. GBP still stalled there as well. Nas continuing past 61%. No pullback yet. No proper pullback. Let's see if this candle did tap our range. But it's too quick. I want to see at least a couple more candles in this area. Nas now pushing to 71%, most likely the New York Fair Value Gap. It's pretty much in no man's land. Again, it could reject here, or it could give us a bullish confirmation, but this late in the game, we're not interested. So guys, thanks for joining us today. Make sure you check us out on fractaleffects.com, where we teach high probability trading. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please turn on your notifications so you know when we're live, and also follow us on Instagram, fractal.effects, where we're always posting educational material, and we will start doing a weekly review every Sunday. And we will see you guys next week. Take care.